From the content below, write a complete story, keeping the length of the story the same. Rain drummed steadily on the slate roofs of Armagh in the spring of 1094, as though heralding the arrival of someone destined to stir both holy halls and royal courts. In a modest stone house just beyond the city's walls, Máel Máedóc Ua Morgair drew his first breath. His parents, minor nobles of Ulster, had carved out a life between rival territories where the rivalries of local kings often eclipsed any whisper of peace. Yet, in the midst of Viking raids and clan skirmishes, they dared to hope that their newborn son might become a beacon of unity rather than discord. From the earliest days, the boy's birth carried an aura of mystery. Generations later, biographers would record that Máel Máedoc's mother dreamed of an angelic figure cradling the infant and speaking of a future in which he would stand before both kings and pontiffs. While this vision belongs more properly to the realm of legend than to verifiable history, it reveals how deeply his life was refracted through the lens of holiness from the very beginning. At age 7, Máel Máedóc was entrusted to the abbey school at Armagh, institution run by Cistercian tutors whose discipline was as austere as the Irish climate. There, he learned to read Latin, parse scripture, and grapple with the rudiments of canon law. Yet it was not only scholastic rigor that shaped him. Scribes at the scriptorium soon noticed that during the noonday prayers, the boy would slip away from the chanting monks. He would stand quietly by the long wooden benches, his gaze fixed on the illuminated initials that brightened the margins of sacred texts. Some whispered that he was meditating so deeply he forgot the world outside. Others suggested he glimpsed things no eye could ordinarily see. No contemporary chronicler records miraculous deeds in those early years, and the official annals remain silent on any supernatural phenomena. It was only later, when Máel Máedóc had become known far beyond Armagh, that hagiographers filled the gaps with stories of a youth who could name unexpected visitors before they even entered the abbey gates. Such tales, while difficult to corroborate, point to a man whose reputation for insight and spiritual intensity began well before his ordination. To appreciate this transformation, we must peer into Ireland at the turn of the 12th century. The island, though Christian for half a millennium since St. Patrick's mission, remained divided into tuatha, each ruled by its own rior king. These petty lords often saw the church not as a sacred institution, but as a source of wealth and influence. They installed unqualified kin as abbots and diverted tithes to fund feuds. Meanwhile, far to the south and east, reformers like St. Bernard of Clairvaux preached a return to monastic purity and alignment with Roman practice, their clarion call swept across Europe, inspiring a parallel movement in Ireland. It was into this tension between tribal politics and ecclesiastical reform that Máel Máedóc came of age. At 17, he left Armagh to enter the monastery at Clonard, long famed as the seedbed of saints. Here, under the guidance of mentors like St. Murnoch and St. Ciaran figures whose own histories are part lore, part fact, he embraced an even more rigorous asceticism. Twice each week he fasted to the point of near weakness. Each evening, by flickering candlelight, he painstakingly copied manuscripts preserving patristic teachings that might otherwise have languished in obscurity. And when the world slept, he spent hours in silent orison, seeking union with God through prayer so intense that the stone walls of Clonard were said to tremble at his devotion. These formative years at Clonard forged in Máel Máedóc a temperament both humble and resolute. He learned to administer not by coercion but by service, tending to the poor in nearby villages, negotiating peace between feuding shepherds, and insisting that every monk, regardless of birth, share equally in the monastery's work and resources. His reputation spread quickly, a young Irish monk whose fierce piety and gentle leadership made him a figure of both awe and affection. What inner fire drives a young man to embrace such severe disciplines when the world beckons with distractions? Was it the angelic vision of his mother's dream, or something deeper buried in his soul? As Malachy, now the Latinized form of Máel Máedóc, prepared to step onto a larger stage, we begin to see how these austere years at Clonard would shape his mission to reform not only a humble monastery but an entire national church. In our next chapter, we will trace the journey from this humble monk's cell to the threshold of higher office, as Malachy's zeal and wisdom earn him the recognition of bishops, kings, and ultimately the Pope himself, propelling him toward the role that would mark his place in history as both reformer and prophetic saint. Rain still clung to the emerald fields as Máel Máedóc stepped out of Clonard's ancient gates, his monastic robes still damp from a dawn-long vigil. Within those hallowed walls he had honed body and spirit, fasting twice weekly and copying Scripture by candlelight, all in service of an inner vision, an Irish church freed from simony, nepotism, and secular meddling. Now, around the year 1115, that vision will be tested in the wider world as he assumed leadership of Glen Rónn, a modest monastic cell nestled in County Down. Glen Rónn was no glittering cathedral. Its stone chapel barely held a dozen monks, and its vast library implies of little more than a handful of dusty manuscripts. Yet under Malachy's firm hand, strict new rules took root. He banned drunken revels in the refectory, replaced idle chatter with nightly vigils, and insisted that every brother devote hours each day to study. His zeal bore fruit. Within 10 years, Glen Rónn's collection swelled with precious volumes, beads, ecclesiastical history, papal decretals, and treats on canon law previously scarce in Ireland. Monks who once regarded scholarship as a distraction now stayed late into the night illuminating initials and debating theological points. Word of these quiet yet radical reforms could not be contained within County Down. By 1120, delegates at the Irish synods were praising Malachy's Luke-like devotion, both in healing the sick and in preserving the intellectual foundations of the cloister. In that year, they recommended him to Pope Callixtus II, a delicate move requiring both ecclesiastical diplomacy and royal favor. Fragments of a letter preserved in the Vatican secret archives bear witness to what followed. Written in careful Latin, it addresses Prior Máel Máedóc Ua Morgair of Glen Rónn and lauds his zeal for monastic purity. More tellingly, it grants him the pallium, the woolen stole reserved for archbishops and special envoys of Rome, symbolizing his formal unity with the Holy See. Although the medieval curia's records are incomplete, this document stands as the first verifiable link between Malachy and the wider Catholic world. Contemporary Irish annals remain silent on supernatural occurrences, but later hagiographers could not resist attributing miracles to the reformer. They tell of a blind abbot whose sight was restored at Malachy's prayer, a raging storm calmed, as he blessed a fishing boat, and a prophetic warning uttered before the sudden death of a local chieftain. These stories, while lacking independent confirmation, reflect a medieval tendency to sanctify reformers by enveloping them in legend, a testament to the deep impression his character made on those who came after. In 1123, Máel Máedóc was ordained to the priesthood. He returned briefly to Clonard, this time not as a student, but as a teacher of Scripture and Latin. His sermons during these years emphasized the shepherd's duty to care for the least among his flock. One such homily, later recorded by the chronicler Giraldus Cambrensis, drew a vivid metaphor. A shepherd who denies his flock warmth and food is no shepherd at all, but a wolf in shepherd's clothing. Through prison visits, ministry to widows, and peace brokering among feuding clans, he earned a reputation for pastoral care that matched his prior fame for monastic rigor. By the mid-1120s, stories of Malachy's austere piety and political acumen spread beyond Downpatrick and Armagh. Traveling bishops recounted his skill in negotiating truces. Pilgrims spoke of the serenity they felt on visiting Glen Rónn. Was it his authentic compassion or the aura of sanctity woven by enthusiastic chroniclers? Whichever the case, by 1127, he was summoned back to Armagh, this time to serve as coadjutor to the aging Archbishop Turlough O'Connor. Through prison visits, ministry to widows, and peace brokering among feuding clans, he earned a reputation for pastoral care that matched his prior fame for monastic rigor. By the mid-1120s, stories of Malachy's austere piety and political acumen spread beyond Downpatrick and Armagh. Traveling bishops recounted his skill in negotiating truces. Pilgrims spoke of the serenity they felt on visiting Glen Rónn. Was it his authentic compassion or the aura of sanctity woven by enthusiastic chroniclers? Whichever the case, by 1127. He was summoned back to Armagh this time to serve as coadjutor to the aging Archbishop Turlough O'Connor. This appointment signaled a new phase. No longer merely a monastic reformer, Máel Máedóc now stands poised to reshape the entire Irish Church from its ancient seat. His path from the cloistered cells of Clonard to the Cathedral of Armagh exemplifies the delicate balance between spiritual fervor and political savvy. How does a man maintain the discipline of a monk while wielding influence among kings and prelates? In our next chapter, we will witness Malachy's elevation to Archbishop of Armagh, where he will enact sweeping measures to align Irish practice with Roman norms and steer a nation's faith into a new era of unity. Rain-soaked flags still fluttered over Armagh's stone walls when word arrived that Archbishop Turlough O'Connor had died in late spring of 1132. For decades, O'Connor had navigated the tricky currents of Gaelic chieftains and Norman newcomers, but age at last claimed him. Now, in the great hall of the royal fortress, King Máel Ua Morgair of Munster convened with senior clerics to choose a successor. Some advocated a native Gaelic favorite who would preserve local customs. Others pushed for a reformer wielding papal favor. In a surprising display of unity, they all agreed on one name, Máel Máedóc Ua Morgair, the former prior of Glen Rónn who had already impressed both synods and the Holy See. On June 13, 1132, under a sky swollen with rain clouds, Malachy's consecration took place in the cathedral at Armagh. The annals of Ulster record the event as both solemn and hopeful. Gaelic rites harp music, the blessing of local saints' relics blended seamlessly with the chanting of the Roman rite, new to many Irish ears. When a pallium sent by Pope Innocent II was draped around Malachy's shoulders, it symbolized more than personal honor. It marked his role as a living bridge between the Irish Church's cherished traditions and the greater unity of Christendom under Rome. With his pallium still warm on his shoulders, Archbishop Malachy set to work transforming Armagh into a model diocese. First, he standardized the liturgy, outlawing the patchwork of local mass texts in favor of papal-approved rites. Some older priests grumbled at the loss of beloved melodies, but many laity found solace in the clarity and consistency of the new worship. Second, he founded a cathedral school, the first of its kind in Ireland that openly welcomed both Irish and Norman students. Here, boys learned Latin grammar, memorized scripture, and studied rudimentary canon law. What began as a handful of pupils soon swelled into a thriving seminary, producing clergy equipped to serve a rapidly changing island. Third, Malachy demonstrated that spiritual leadership could heal political wounds. In 1135, during the fierce O'Neill-O'Donnell skirmishes in Ulster, the two chieftains agreed to a meeting under his mediation. Through patient negotiation, he secured a truce that halted raids for several months, proof that a bishop armed only with words could preserve peace more effectively than any army. Not all Gaelic lords welcomed Rome's growing influence. Some monks rumored that Malachy had become too close to foreign interests. Yet others, like Donchad Ua Máedóc, king of Meath, valued the archbishop's moral authority. Ua Máedóc sought Malachy's blessing for a campaign to subdue lesser chieftains who threatened his realm. Though tempted by the alliance, Malachy steadfastly refused to barter spiritual office for military support. His motto, "No crown of gold can adorn a crown of thorns." Between 1132 and 1138, Malachy maintained a steady stream of correspondence with Pope Innocent II and Archbishop Bernard of Clairvaux. Surviving fragments now housed in the Vatican secret archives reveal a man deeply concerned with the Church's integrity. In a letter dated March 1136, he warned, "The bark of the Irish Church sails in stormy waters. Only the anchor of holy poverty can prevent her from foundering." His letters decried simony, condemned clerical marriage, and urged bishops to embrace apostolic poverty. These missives traveled across the Alps and contributed to wider reform movements that reshaped monasteries and cathedrals throughout Europe. By the end of his tenure, which lasted until 1148, Malachy had increased the number of trained clergy by an estimated 30%, a remarkable feat in an Ireland long hamstrung by localism. His synods in 1134 and 1137 drew delegates from every province, a precedent-setting achievement that laid the groundwork for the Synod of Kells in 1152, which formally reorganized the Irish Church's diocesan structure. His establishment of a cathedral school set the standard for clerical education, while his insistence on liturgical uniformity deepened the laity's reverence for the Mass. Even secular leaders came to respect an archbishop, who preached charity and justice as insistently as any monk had preached silence and fasting. Can the vision of a single leader truly reshape centuries of entrenched custom? In Malachy's case, it did, at least long enough to prepare Ireland for the wider currents of reform sweeping through 12th century Christendom. Century Christendom. In our next chapter, we accompany Archbishop Malachy on his fateful 1139 pilgrimage to Rome, where he would stand before Pope Innocent II, not just as a petitioner for Irish reforms, but as a mystic on the cusp of receiving a vision that would cement his prophetic legacy. Rain-swept docks of Dublin glistened beneath a summer sky as Archbishop Malachy boarded the humble Breton vessel that would carry him across the Irish Sea in the summer of 1139, his destination, the heart of Christendom, Rome. Yet this was no leisurely pilgrimage. Rather, it was a mission born of urgency, conviction, and a growing sense that Ireland's reform could only find full realization with papal blessing and reinforcements from the broader Church. From his cathedral in Armagh, Malachy had cultivated a vision of an Irish Church cleansed of corruption and aligned with Roman norms. He had standardized liturgies, founded schools, and brokered peace among warring clans, but these achievements needed reinforcement from the papacy itself. Pope Innocent II, embroiled in a bitter dispute with the antipope Callixtus II, could offer both moral authority and the promise of missionary support. For Malachy, this journey was both a plea for aid and a test of his own spiritual mettle. The Breton ship hugged the rugged Irish coastline before heading into deeper waters. Few maritime logs of the period survive, but later chronicles place Malachy ashore at Monte Cassino, the cradle of Benedictine monasticism, where he spent days in silent meditation among the ancient ruins of St. Benedict's Abbey. In Benevento, he is said to have knelt before the relics of earlier reformers, seeking guidance and affirmation of his mission. Each stop deepened his resolve, transforming the physical hardships of travel into an inner journey of preparation. By February 1140, Malachy reached the sprawling grandeur of Rome. He lodged at the Hospital of St. John Lateran, a sanctuary for pilgrims and clerics alike. His arrival coincided with a frigid winter, and for a man accustomed to Ireland's damp chill, the marble corridors of the Lateran Church must have felt both awe-inspiring and alien. Securing a private audience with Pope Innocent II was no small feat. Accounts diverge. Some legendary narratives claim Malachy fell to his knees so suddenly in the papal chambers that courtiers feared he was struck by divine ecstasy or sudden illness. More prosaic records suggest a formal exchange of letters, Malachy outlining the reforms underway in Ireland, Innocent expressing solidarity and promising additional missionaries. Whether dramatic or diplomatic, the meeting cemented Malachy's standing as Rome's trusted envoy and Ireland's champion. It was in those sacred halls that, according to 16th century sources, Malachy received the vision that would secure his place in legend. He beheld, within a single tapestry of light, a rapid procession of papal coats of arms, each accompanied by a cryptic Latin phrase. The eye could scarcely follow the brilliance before the next image emerged. Yet Malachy's hand flew to his breviary, transcribing "Cum clave rubra" with the red key, "de labor solis" from the toil of the sun, and on through 112 distinct prophecies. The dramatic account first surfaced in 1590, when Benedictine monk Arnold Rion published Lignum Vitae, claiming to have discovered Malachy's original manuscript in the Vatican archives. Modern scholars contest this provenance. No document predating 1587 mentions the prophecies, but they acknowledge an uncanny accuracy in a surprising number of mottos matching pontiffs elected after Wyon's publication. Was this the residue of a genuine 12th century revelation or a Renaissance-era invention crafted to lend authority to certain papal narratives. During his Armagh sojourn, Malachy shared the St. John Lateran Hospital with pilgrims from across Europe. A French knight, Guillaume de Poitiers, later recorded a fleeting conversation. He spoke often of final judgments and of a power hidden even from Rome's mightiest throne. Guillaume's words, preserved in a chronicle now housed in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, hint at a man whose faith was as expansive as his administrative skill. In the cloistered gardens, Malachy comforted sick travelers and listened to tales of distant courts, each story reinforcing his conviction that Ireland's humble church was part of a grander tapestry. By Easter 1140, the Breton vessel guided Malachy back to Dublin's quay. Weighed down not with gold or relics, but with a small leather-bound codex, Malachy made the journey home in contemplative silence. In the quiet cloisters of Armagh, he transferred the Latin mottos from breviary margins into a consolidated manuscript he titled Gesta Romani Pontificis, Deeds of the Roman Pontiffs. He never intended this codex for immediate public release. Instead, it lay in a locked chest. Among his papers, a testament to private revelation rather than ecclesiastical decree. Yet the swiftness with which rumors of his visions spread, even reaching Arnold Wyon centuries later, suggests that the seeds of intrigue were sown almost immediately. Malachy's pilgrimage did more than secure papal endorsement. It crystallized his dual identity as both reformer and mystic. The same pope who had applauded his synods now, in Malachy's mind, stood among the procession of future pontiffs, each bound to Rome's unbroken line of apostolic succession. This unity of purpose, combining institutional reform with visionary insight, would define his legacy in Ireland and beyond. Rhetorical question: did the mist of centuries obscure an authentic prophetic gift, or did the glow of legend merely illuminate a clever ecclesiastic's exercise in authority? In our next segment, we will delve into the mysterious codex itself, exploring how those 112 cryptic mottos were composed, transmitted, and finally thrust into the public eye, igniting controversies that reverberate to this day. Rain pattered softly against the windows of Armagh's scriptorium as Archbishop Malachy sat hunched over a plain wooden desk, the leather-bound codex before him flickering in candlelight. It was Easter 1140, mere weeks since his return from Rome, and in his hands lay the distilled essence of centuries of papal history, 112 cryptic Latin mottos destined to become the stuff of legend. Yet how, one might ask, does a humble archbishop compress the lives of dozens of successor pontiffs into so brief a form? To answer that, we must navigate the delicate boundary between medieval hagiography and early historical scholarship. According to Arnold Wyon's 1590 publication Lignum Veda, Malachy's first glimpse of the prophecies came one storm-lashed night in a Roman guest house near the Lateran Palace. Wyon's account, steeped in the dramatic flair of the Counter-Reformation era, describes how Malachy awoke to a spectral vision, two great keys of St. Peter, gleaming in an otherworldly light, each key unlocking a panorama of future popes. In that exalted trance, he is said to have seized scraps of parchment by the bedside, jotting down each Latin phrase before the scene dissolved. He then bound the fragments together with a thin leather cord, and so the story goes, a saintly act of divine revelation. This enchanting tale captures the medieval imagination perfectly. A saint favored by heaven, granted glimpses of sacred continuity. Yet no contemporary 12th century source records it. Rather, it emerges 4 centuries later, inviting us to weigh legend against evidence. Modern historians, ever skeptical of retroactive miracles, propose a more prosaic explanation. Malachy was, after all, a learned man fluent in Latin, steeped in Bede's ecclesiastical history, and well acquainted with the papal decrees he had studied at Glen Rónn in Armagh. It is plausible that he systematically reviewed the coats of arms, regional origins, and theological emphases of contemporary popes and extrapolated symbolic mottos for successors. For instance, a noble family crest bearing an olive branch might inspire Gloria Olivae, while a pope hailing from a sunny countryside could be evoked by De Labor Solis. Viewed this way, the prophecies become an early form of ecclesiastical branding, an imaginative exercise in forecasting leadership traits rather than a straightforward transmittal of divine secrets. This theory does not entirely diminish their fascination. Rather, it repositions Malachi as a bridge between scriptural typology and heraldic symbolism. In an age when astrology, genealogy, and theology interwove naturally, such creative scholarship would have been both admired and expected of a church reformer. Whether born in vision or crafted through careful study, the prophecies commences with Celestine II, elected 1143, and culminates in the enigmatic Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman, a title heralded as the final pope before the end times. Among the 112, a handful stand out: de Ruhr Albo, from the white countryside, interpreted by some as a nod to Pope Clement III, whose birthplace lay near chalky fields; Gloria Olivae, Glory of the Olive, linked to Pope John XXIII, whose family crest prominently displayed an olive branch; de Labor Solis, from the toil of the sun, remarkably resonant with Pope Urban VIII, known for the Barberini Bee emblem and ambitious architectural projects under the Mediterranean sun. A dozen or so mottos align with such precision that conspiracy cowers before coincidence. Were these truly prophetic glimpses or retrospective matches sculpted by later scribes? Deciding this often depends less on hard proof than on one's appetite for mystery. No manuscript penned in Malachi's own hand survives today. The earliest known reference to the prophecies appears in Wyon's 1590 edition, yet scattered copies surfaced in monastic libraries across France, Germany, and Spain throughout the 17th century. By then, the Jesuits had joined the fray, some scholars within the order defending authenticity, others casting doubt. Yet even skeptics preserved copies in Roman archives, arguing that regardless of origin, the texts held devotional value. The Napoleonic Wars wrought havoc on Europe's archives. Libraries burned, cloisters suppressed, and manuscripts scattered or hidden for safekeeping. It was not until the mid-19th century that gleaming fragments re-emerged in private collections and national museums. Today, researchers consult variants from Paris, Munich, and Madrid, piecing together a lineage of transmission as intricate as the mottos themselves. If Malachi intended the prophecies for public consumption, why did they slumber away for over 4 centuries? One theory holds that they were classified reserved for crises when Rome stood on the brink, revealed only to alert faithful of an impending Petrus Romanus scenario. Another suggests that any papal succession forecast was politically sensitive, potentially undermining conclaves by implying an inevitable outcome. Thus, the codex remained locked in vaults, its true power latent, until the Renaissance appetite for arcana unlocked its secrets. As we reflect on Malachi's dual roles, reformer and prophet, we see a man who married disciplined scholarship with a flair for the mysterious. His standardization of liturgy and dedication to clerical education laid structural foundations that persist in Ireland's diocese. Simultaneously, his prophecies enshrined him in the realm of the uncanny, a figure both administrative and mystical. Rhetorical question: are these 112 phrases genuine windows into divine revelation or mirrors, reflecting our perennial longing for hidden order? In our concluding chapter, we will explore Part 6, how Malachi's legacy has echoed through the centuries, its influence on church reform, its controversies among historians, and the enduring fascination it inspires in scholars, theologians, and curious minds alike. Stay with us as we unravel the final threads of a prophecy that refuses to be silenced. Rain tapped against the stained glass windows of Westminster College as Professor Helena Graves adjusted her glasses, preparing to address a hushed lecture hall. On the large screen behind her glowed a single phrase: Petrus Romanus. For centuries, these 2 words coined in a medieval codex have sparked fervent debate, sweeping from Renaissance scholars and candlelit scriptoria to modern YouTubers chasing clickbait. Today, we journey through the enduring fascination of Saint Malachy's prophecies, examining how a 12th century archbishop's notebook evolved into a cultural lodestone for hope, fear, and controversy. In the 17th century, Catholic Europe still reeled from the tremors of the Western Schism, 1378 to 1417, when two and at one point three rival claimants each donned the tiara. Scholars of the day pored over Malachy's mottos, arguing that his vision vindicated one papal line over another. For them, prophecy served as a divine arbitrator, settling fractious debates about legitimacy and unbroken apostolic succession. By the 18th century, the prophecies had become a staple in theological controversies. Jesuit theologian Francesco Sforza Pallavicino cited Malachi to reinforce ultramontane claims of papal infallibility. Yet, even as royal courts and bishops invoked with the red key or from the toil of the sun, the rural faithful heard tales of a saint who had glimpsed the very end of papal history. Fast forward to the 19th century, Europe's liberal revolutions challenged both thrones and altars. Ultramontane Catholics, those who championed strong papal authority, soundtracked their warnings with Malachy's prophecy of Petrus Romanus, the final pope who would preside over an apocalyptic climax. In lectures from Paris salons to Vienna universities, Malachy's words became both rallying cry and cautionary tale. Yet as the prophecies gained traction, critical historians began to question their origin. By the late 19th century, three primary objections took shape. Anachronism objection, no mention of Malachy's 112 mottos, appears in any manuscript before 1590. How could such seismic revelations remain silent for 4 centuries? Linguistic analysis. Certain Latin constructions, word forms, and idioms reflect later medieval usage, suggesting that at least some passages were interpolated after Malachy's era. Statistical critique. Of the 112 prophecies, perhaps a dozen neatly align with post-1587 pontiffs. The majority remain so vague olive groves, white fields, that skeptics argue they can be retrofitted to almost any pope. Nevertheless, a smaller cohort of scholars mounts a spirited defense. They point out that recurring motifs, olives symbolizing peace, doves evoking the Holy Spirit, fields alluding to pastoral care reflect the symbolic language native to 12th century ecclesiastical writing. They argue that coincidence alone cannot account for the resonance of mottos like Gloria Olivae with Pope John XXIII, whose family crest indeed bore an olive branch. How did these mottos survive at all? No original codex in Malachy's hand. Endures. The earliest known compilation surfaces in 1590, when Benedictine monk Arnold Weyon published Lignum Veda, claiming to have discovered the prophecies in the Vatican archives. Subsequent copies circulated in monastic libraries across France, Germany, and Spain. By the 17th century, Jesuit archivists, some skeptical, others convinced, carefully preserved variants in Roman vaults. During the Napoleonic Wars, many ecclesiastical libraries were ransacked or suppressed. Monks spirited manuscripts to private estates. Some were lost, others hidden in disguised bindings. It was not until the mid-19th century that these fragments re-emerged in national collections, Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale, Munich's Bayerische Staatsbibliothek, and Madrid's Biblioteca Nacional, sparking renewed scholarly interest and popular curiosity. In our digital age, Malachy's prophecies have found new life. Documentaries stream on niche cable channels, and conspiracy-themed podcasts debate whether Peter the Roman looms at the next conclave. Social media explodes each time a pope is elected. Within hours, the hashtag Petrus ROMANUS trends on Twitter. TikTokers overlay cryptic Latin phrases on videos of papal processions, and amateur sleuths scour Wikipedia for family crests matching Doror Albo or De Labor Solis. Even non-religious viewers relish the puzzle. Matching mottos to modern pontiffs becomes a game of historical detective work. Is Pope Francis known for his emphasis on ecological stewardship, symbolized by Gloria Olivae? Could Pope Benedict XVI, an academic who shone light on doctrinal clarity, be foreshadowed by Lumen and Kyla? This blend of scholarship, speculation, and spectacle reflects our broader appetite for hidden narratives and symbolic continuity beyond the thrill of prediction. Malachi's story carries deeper spiritual resonance. Whether one believes in literal prophecy or views the mottos as medieval creativity, his life exemplifies service, reform, and bridging cultures. He negotiated peace among warring Irish clans, standardized liturgy to unify disparate practices, and founded schools that educated Norman and Gaelic youths together. His dedication reminds us that true authority lies not in foretelling dates but in nurturing communities. In a world awash with certainty and skepticism, Malachy's codex invites humility. It challenges us to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, to embrace mystery, and to recognize that history, like prophecy, is often a mirror reflecting our deepest hopes and fears. As the College of Cardinals prepares to convene again. 1. Question lingers over St. Peter's Basilica. Will Petrus Romanus herald an apocalyptic finale, or simply mark the beginning of another chapter we cannot yet imagine? Perhaps the greatest prophecy lies not in the 112 Latin phrases themselves, but in our collective yearning for certainty in uncertain times, for divine order amid chaos, for stories that bind us across the centuries, if you've been captivated by the life and mysteries of Saint Malachy, hit like, subscribe for deep dives into forgotten prophecies, and comment below, which motto do you find most convincing, and do you believe the final prophecy is yet to come?